So, you want to attend the panel? My panel. By my rules. I am the gatekeeper! And I've been practicing that for weeks to have it suck that badly.
And you did well.
I rule this panel, and you will obey my rules. I'm definitely seeing some recognition around here. Some of you know what I'm talking about. So before we go any further, I need to weed out the true fans with a really good "Yes, my gatekeeper." And I want it loud. I want it so loud that the people who went to the other panel across the hall know that they made a bad decision today. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3.
Yes, my gatekeeper!
Fucking ruled. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to my panel. My name is Subissati. I'm the executive editor of Rue Morgue magazine and the co-host of the Faculty of Horror podcast, and I am joined today by a very special guest who flew all the way from the other side of the world, Mr. Phillips Tanner, creator of Nightmare/Atmosfear. So maybe to start, Philip, we are going to talk about the origins of the game. We are going to talk about the recent 30th anniversary edition. Maybe we'll give a couple away to the biggest super fans in the room. Who knows? But to get started, let's maybe talk about the fact that I'm calling it Nightmare, and you're seeing Atmosfear right there. What's up with that?
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm going to do first is I'm just going to play in the background just as a thing. It's basically just a series of all the commercials that we shot during the period, so if you may have seen a bunch of these, but anyway, that'll give a little bit of the audio's down, so all you'll see is the pictures. Hopefully that's working now. So the reason was quite simple. The game was called Nightmare, the video board game Nightmare in Australia. It was released in Canada, not quite into North America, and then when we released it into Europe, we couldn't get the name. As in, they had a game over there called Nightmare with a K, and so from a legal perspective, we didn't really want to spend all the money fighting it. Nightmare was always known as the game of Atmosphere, as in F-E-A-R, so we opted to call it Atmosphere for Europe, and that's why when we relaunched it in the 30th edition, and anything from 95 on, with a game called The Harbingers, it was always called Atmosphere after that. So Nightmare to start, and then it became morphed into Atmosphere, but it's effectively exactly the same game.
Mm-hmm. But the question of regional distribution is so interesting to me because I am Canadian and, an elder millennial. So to me, this game as Nightmare was the quintessential sleepover game. Everyone has this game, and you can hop onto any Facebook Marketplace garage sale, and you will find Nightmare quite readily. But from what I understand, it's not quite as available here, and that was because of distribution woes in North America.
Yeah, so in North America, what ended up happening is we did a deal with a company in Canada called Chieftain Games with a guy called Tom Vernon. Tom Vernon had found, he was the guy who first got Trivial Pursuit. I'm sure you guys are pretty aware of that game. Anyway, he saw Nightmare when we presented it to him, and he wanted Nightmare to be his next Trivial Pursuit. But the problem was that he took the rights in America, so he had the Canadian rights, and he also tried to he wanted the rights in North America. But when, just before it was due to be launched, unfortunately he passed away, and his sons did not have the same sort of passion for the game, let's put it that way, as their father. So unfortunately it never really took place. It still leached about, I think, 350,000 units over the border for that first year or so. So it still did actually pretty good numbers in the States, but nothing like it would have done, if he'd been behind it and pushed it marketing-wise. That said, the game, the 95 version of the game, Atmosfear, The Harbingers, was picked up by Mattel and distributed internationally, including America, and subsequent games have also been pushed through the States, but nothing obviously had the success of the original video board game.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of this, like an original video board game, some of you might know that this was the first game of that concept, and I'm assuming everyone here knows that this is a board game that you play with an accompanying VHS tape, which is so brilliant because the VHS tape tells you how to play. It keeps everything within a nice tight hour, and I think anyone who witnessed the production quality of the video knew that these are either gamers who are also interested in film production, or the other way around? And which was it, Philip?
So we were, my business partner at the time with a couple of cowboys was a guy called Brett Clements. So both of us were reporters on a kids' TV show in Australia. And anyway, Brett had done a story with a games company in Australia called Crown and Andrews. And he came back and said, I can make a game. And he made a game called Ozquiz, which did really well in Australia. Then we joined forces while we were still on the show. And we did a game called Dare, which got picked up by Parker Brothers in the States. And we did a few other games as well. But when we were also a production company, so we're doing a lot of television work, and we're also doing a lot of corporate video work for particularly tourism organisations like Australia, Thailand and New Zealand. And anyway, I was saying to Brett, we should think about doing a horror film because we want to do a feature. And he went away with that thought and came back and said we should basically combine our production skills with our gaming skills, and we therefore came up, that's where the idea of Nightmare came from. So Brett came up and he said, let's do this, and then obviously we had to develop it over that period of time because there hadn't been a game like this before, certainly not combining the two elements of it. So for us it was just a case of working through a lot of development time, and then when it came time for the pitch, which I might as well go straight into.
Yes, I love this story.
We went into a company called Roadshow Entertainment. So we first presented the game to Crown and Andrews, which is the gaming company in Australia, who said this game is too big for us. So we took it then to Roadshow Entertainment. Roadshow Entertainment are part of Village Roadshow Pictures. Village Roadshow Pictures are a major film production company, also based out of LA now, but an Australian group. And they were also the sort of leading people in terms of VHS and this sort of stuff. So they'd never done a board game before. We showed it to the sales guy. He left the meeting, called in the managing director. The managing director then of Roadshow Entertainment came in. He was told, you have to see this game. 45 minutes later, we walked out with a deal with Roadshow Entertainment. Again, they hadn't done board games before, but the benefits of them were also that they had major video distribution, which means that before every video in Australia, not so much overseas, but before every video that they released, and they were doing all the distribution for the major studios and stuff. So all of the big films that came through had a Nightmare commercial, these commercials that you're seeing at the moment, before the videotapes, and also because they had cinema, all the cinemas, we had Nightmare playing in all the cinemas. So of course, from a marketing perspective, it couldn't have been better. But what ended up happening after we sold it to Roadshow Entertainment is that they were always about how do we make sure we make a bit of noise about this. So our first sales meeting, and we decided to do it big, is we created effectively a haunted house in Melbourne, which is one of the major cities in Australia. And we set out and we did this whole thing, and we had all the games there all mocked up, and we had, because at this stage it was still mock-ups because we hadn't mass-produced the game. So we had all the mock-ups there, and we had these sales teams walking through. And our first meeting was with Kmart. And Kmart, normally a good game in Australia will sell 5,000 units. We walked out at that meeting with Kmart having sold basically 30,000 units for that Christmas. So for us, that was really the start of, when we knew, okay, this thing we think is going to do okay. We were lucky. But it does, I'll be honest with you, you can have the best idea in the world, but without great marketing and great things, it doesn't mean shit. And for us, the beauty of working with a partner like them was we had somebody who understood the passion. Brett had a very good eye, as you can see, with just how the thing needed to be marketed and seen. And so it was, once that happened, then internationally we took it to Canada. In fact, Canada was the first place that picked it up. And then it went across, he got colleagues out of Europe, and then it sold throughout Europe as well. So I think it was 92, it really exploded at that stage.
Did it ever? And if you guys can't tell that I've interviewed Philip before, it's when the 30th anniversary of Nightmare / Atmosfear was coming out, I was working on the VHS Halloween special edition of Rue Morgue, so we talked about it. So I knew the Kmart story. I love the Kmart story. I love any opportunity to think back to Kmart. But really, I feel like that just highlights what's great about this game, is that like it kind of sold itself, didn't it? And like oftentimes when I'm trying to play modern board games with friends, there's that learning curve and everyone's like, oh, I don't know if I have the energy to learn a whole new board game. You have to play it a couple of times to really develop the strategy. This one, you're just off to the races. And I think it's that very nature of it that perhaps overlooks some, I don't want to call them flaws, I'm trying to find a different word, but perhaps some ambiguities. For example, you'll be off to the races, the gatekeeper will tell you how to play, he won't tell you which way to go. He won't necessarily tell you, and I asked this of Philip yesterday, you're going from tombstone to tombstone, right? And some of them are broken. So I asked him yesterday, like, are those two spots or are those one? And, you know, even the ending and choosing your greatest fear, there's a lot of kind of vagaries of Atmosfear.
There are. I think the thing about Atmosfear is we describe it as frightening fun. It's pure entertainment. I mean, it's designed, there's a little bit of strategy, there's a lot of luck, there's a lot of stupidity. It's absolutely fun. The thing that worked, I think, from a game perspective, is that it doesn't take itself too seriously, but there is still that level. Firstly, as an overview, I think people love to be scared. You know, I think we've all got that little sense in us that boo factor works a treat. So to have a board game where we were able to use the visuals as well as that extraordinary soundtrack that was written for it, and it was effectively linear, and the fact that these are all the benefits of the game. So when you talk flaws, I talk benefits. It had like a 60-minute tape, and so everybody knew you start the game and the maximum it was going to take was 60 minutes. To your point, it wasn't a lot of learning. You just had to, go around, collect the keys, face the cards, face the gatekeeper. You knew that you also had your opponents that you had to challenge as well. Plus you had that soundtrack. And what was happening is, for those who played the game, is that towards the end it is chaos, and it was designed to be chaos. And the whole thing is that it was always, at that stage, almost the rules go out the window. And you'll see even the gatekeeper, he lets people get away with certain stuff, he doesn't let people get away with other stuff. And the design of the game was always, we were talking about this yesterday, and in some ways, because of our TV and film background, our interest was always in creating a story that had a sort of an arc to it. Now, there's not much of an arc, it's not like anybody goes on any great journey, but basically it is a game of three thirds, where you have the start of the game, then you've got the middle, and by the end it's absolutely chaos, where you're all trying to, as I said, the rules effectively go out the window, because at that stage people are throwing the dice, people are just moving. People sometimes help each other, sometimes don't help each other. Often the gatekeeper wins simply because nobody's really understood what's going on. But again, if you listen to, like, the only instruction is, turn the lights down and turn the sound up, and it worked. And also, I've got to say, our casting of Venanti as the gatekeeper, and do you mind if I have a quick little chat about that?
Let's go. I want to talk about him a lot.
Yeah, so Venanti, I wanted to be an actor when I was a kid. I was hopeless. But I did get an agent, and my agent, in Australia, he wasn't the best of agents. He wasn't the worst, but he wasn't the best of agents. But it sort of suited somebody with my lack of skill. But he also represented a few other people. So when we were looking for our gatekeeper character, we knew that he had to have an accent. That's what we were looking for. When we wanted somebody with a real accent, and somebody who could come from Transylvania or somewhere in Eastern Europe where people wouldn't necessarily know where the accent came from. So we were looking around, and I rang my agent, and he said, my old agent, and he said, oh look, we've got this guy in our books, you might recognise him, he's from the Guinness commercials. Now,
Does anyone know these commercials?
So,
you're in for a treat.
Yeah, so if you have a look, you would have run them in America. So Guinness is an Irish beer. It's that one where you pour it and it looks incredibly beautiful to come up. It's basically a stout. And anyway, so they ran this series of very weird ads in the late 80s. Rutger Hauer, who's the actor in America, was the actor who was in the ads over here. So they were a very similar campaign, and in this particular ad, it's a glass of Guinness, and as you pour the Guinness in and it comes up and it looks beautiful, Venanti's head sort of peers around the side with that fabulous voice of his going, "I like to watch." And that's all it was. And he'd say that there's like 2 or 3 of these weird commercials all out there, and I thought, this guy's fabulous. So anyway, so I met Venanti, and of course, after the first meeting, we cast him, because not only did he have that odd gatekeeper look, he had that most magnificent voice. And the thing about Nightmare, and I think part of the reason it was so successful, is also that you had this extraordinary actor who could really push the full voice, because again, when he yells stop, and we've had, as Mina was telling me yesterday when she was 9, that she got very nervous towards the end when the gatekeeper yelled at her, and she ended up running into her room. We had another story of a 6-year-old who, when the gatekeeper said, "Stop, whose turn is it next?" It was his kid's turn. Anyway, he literally stood up, ran out of that house, ran down the street, ran into his own house and under the covers. And we heard this because we got complaints from parents about, this horror game. But of course the game was never horror. There's no blood, there's no slash, there's no this or that, but it absolutely scared you. So to have somebody like Venanti as the gatekeeper was absolutely fabulous for us. But it also meant when we started to sell it internationally, I'm just rambling now so you can stop me any time, but when we started to sell it internationally, all of the territories, and it sold around, I think there was 17 territories in the end that picked up the game, and that means different languages. Most of them wanted their own version of the game. And while Venanti could speak Polish, because he was Polish, and I could speak English, and he could speak a bit of French, the French wanted their own version, the Spanish wanted their own version, the Italians wanted their own version, so we had to end up casting. And I'd travel the world casting, and then we would fly them, the actors, back to Australia, and then they would effectively do all the new versions for us, and that's why we had Venanti doing both the Gatekeeper and Baron. For those who didn't know, yes, he did both characters. And then we had Frédérique Fouché, who was our French actress, who ended up doing both the Witch and the Vampire. And because she was French, and she could also speak English, so it was beneficial for us. But it's a costly exercise when you think about what can be done now versus what could be done at that stage. Just in terms of even being able to shoot overseas now, it would be so much easier to do things via Zoom and everything, but that wasn't really an option for us back then, because it is now 30-something years ago. And that's why I appreciate you all being here, because it was 30-something years ago. So, thank you.
Fresh scab in our minds and hearts, isn't it? Now, speaking of scab, speaking of parental outrage, you told me a great story about some higher-level outrage complaints about this game that you received. Do you need a hand?
Yeah, I do. Which one's that one?
Oh, you can't read my handwriting now. Was there a certain government that took
umbrage
with this game?
Oh, yeah. So, 2 things. We released the game in Greece, and they saw because you'll notice that some of the playing pieces have little crosses on them in the cemetery, and they saw that as being anti-religious, so they literally bulldozed 5,000 units of the game because of that. Now, it would have been handy if they'd let us know that before we printed them. And the second one was also the Germans, because it got released in Germany as well, and we got a letter from the German government, or somebody high up, that said basically Germans don't like being yelled at by people. So that's why they didn't think the game was going to work. And so it was this fabulous letter that I had seen, because I went, wow, the irony. But so it still sold, and actually sold pretty well in Germany. Look, there is a difference, and that is that a lot of European territories do really like their games on a much more intellectual basis, and that's one thing you could never accuse Nightmare Atmosfear of being, is an intellectual game. but it still did, throughout Europe it did really well. But yes, it was the Germans and the Greeks, let's put it that way, without naming names.
Starts with G.
Yeah.
Now, you're seeing in the highlight reel here that Philip has put together, and this always catches my eye when I see this, is a crowd of people seemingly in a venue, at a party. It almost looks like a rave. What's up with that, Philip? Tell me about some of the more positive response and the parties that emerged from Atmosfear's success.
Well, I think, again, what happened was that the game quickly became Australia's #1 game. It also was the #1 game in Canada, through a number of territories in Europe, including the UK, France, Italy, I don't think Germany. But because of that success, people wanted to be associated with it. And because it was, the other thing is you'll see, and I do want to talk quickly just about the production values. It was one thing about our game that I think we take great pride in, is that everything that we did with the sense that this thing has to look good. So we would spend a lot of money. All of the commercials we shot on 35mm, and for those who don't, that's what they used to shoot films on. Now, of course, it's digital, but we spent a lot of money on our commercials and making sure that the thing looked good, and so people were happy to be tied to it. So we did a huge dance party. Halloween's not as big a deal in Australia as it is over here, but they wanted to sort of push a Halloween point at this, and they wanted to have a dance party because Halloween happened to fall on a Friday night over in Australia. So we had a huge dance party at a place which was like a big theme park, called Wonderland. So that was part of what we did. Was we did this massive dance party where we got literally thousands of people, and we got them all to call out to the gatekeeper, because we'd recorded basically the gatekeeper, and we also had Baron doing a few where they would lead the whole dance party. And so in the middle of it all, you'd have him coming up, because I don't know if you know, but we released the song through Sony at one stage to do with the game. And so we had that playing. We had, him just introducing the various hits. Again, the gatekeeper was never necessarily that specific about stuff, which is how the interactivity worked, because you'll notice that he calls out to you, but he can't know what you're saying, because of course it's coming off a videotape. But you could have an idea of what the timings with people, and a lot of our development was all about the timings, making sure that the timings worked. But it was that we also did at one stage a Pepsi challenge, which was where basically we had on the side of, I don't know how many thousands of cans, but it was the Nightmare Challenge. It was all tied into this event at Wonderland as well. So it was just the fact that people wanted to be involved with it, because again, it was different, and it was hitting a target market that most of these people wanted to hit.
Oh, yeah. Is it possible to have FOMO for an event that took place 30 years ago? Yes, there is. Now, speaking of the 30 intervening years, we have the 30th anniversary edition here. Can you tell us a bit about what's new, what's updated in the game for those who don't know? Yeah,
so the game itself is the same. So what we did is, on the 30th year, we decided to effectively just do a relaunch of the game, but we weren't going to do it as in a massive thing, so we decided to run a Kickstarter campaign. We needed to raise 90,000, I think, to basically to trigger it, just to release the basic game. And those, I guess, most of you are probably familiar with how Kickstarter works, but we did it, I think it raised just under $500,000 Australian dollars, so it did incredibly well. But it also, in order to do that, you need to spend a lot of money in marketing and all of that to get people to know it, because I think people think Kickstarter is pretty easy to do, but it ain't. But at the same time, what it did do was it allowed us to add some add-ons to it. So along with the game itself, it has now a graphic novel that's attached to it, and we're just about to launch the second graphic novel to it. It's also got different things like skeleton keys and a couple of other things, and this particular box has both the deluxe version has both the original game and also the Baron game in it as well. Yeah, so it's got it's double trouble. So it's basically it was an opportunity to relaunch the game and to say thank you in many ways to people as well for supporting it, because as a creator of a game, and those of you out there who are creators, you would know that if people support it after 30 years, all you can say is thank you. I'm personally on YouTube, there are so many different versions of this game that people have done fan versions of. And while it would be really easy to go, I'm sorry, you're breaching copyright, you're doing all this sort of stuff, to me, I find it absolutely an honour that people are out there wanting to create their own versions of the game, and there have some been seriously cool versions of it. We even had a kids game called Rap Rat as a separate sort of thing, and Rap Rat was this weird little game with this weird character who came out. It didn't do very well, but somebody wrote this article on Creepypasta about it, and suddenly Rap Rat became this horror character, completely out of the blue, that took on a life of its own. And again, I go, fabulous, you know, because in many ways it's sort of like, I think that's part of why we create stuff, is that people can hook onto it and develop their own ideas and everything, which also probably leads, and it's probably a good time given the conference that we're at, that we did do 2 other versions of the game. One got released, one didn't get released. One was a Nintendo version of the game that it got developed, and we were all part of it. It wasn't separate. We had licensed the rights and were developed, but we were just really not happy with what the actual game was, which is why it never got released. But only recently somebody popped this thing onto the internet. I don't know where they got the code from, and just, you know, and started commenting on it. And then, of course, I look around this thing and I think it's probably no better or worse than, you know, many of the games I've seen out there. But at the same time, you know, for our standards, we just weren't that happy with it. But we did do a CDI version of it. For those who don't know what CDI is, does anybody know what CDI is? Yeah. Brilliant. So we did a CDI version of it because we were due to do a CD-ROM version, for those who know CD-ROM. But the company that we were dealing with in the UK said, no, we've got to do CDI, this is the next big thing. So we spent a long time creating this CDI version of the game, and of course, it wasn't the next big thing. Do you remember how long it was around for?
Not very. I don't know the specifics. Someone else might know.
2, 3 years?
Maybe.
Yeah, it wasn't very long.
It wasn't long.
It was too expensive around here.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So that one did happen. You know, we did that as well. But along with the actual original games, we did do 95. We did a game called Atmosfear: The Harbingers, and that also had a booster sort of set to it called the Soul Rangers. Richard wasn't it? Richard down here showed me his set of before we started. You want to show everybody his collection? Oh, he's actually got the Harbingers game. Well, you've got this almost every collection of it. So I could show you mine, but it wouldn't actually match yours. So anyway, just so we did that, and then since then we've also done obviously we had to do a DVD version of the game when it came out. At this stage, Brett and I had separated, gone our different paths, and so I kept the rights to the game, and so we've done basically a couple of versions since then, including an app version not that long ago. But app versions are tricky. Let's put it that way. So.
Has anyone here played the leaked NES game?
The
Okay.
NES one.
And?
I mean, yeah, it's like a standard platformer.
Right?
Like I loaded it on my SNES Mini and everything, and played it classic-wise. I was like, okay, that's not bad.
I haven't played it.
What brought this about?
Thank you.
I've heard that it has just very tenuous connective tissue with the
Yeah,
game,
it's-
other than the gatekeeper appearing. It's like historical horror type thing.
I was like, if you hadn't slapped the name Atmosfear on this, I honestly wouldn't even know.
No, and I think that was our problem with it. So this is Richard's collection of the games, which just shows you the variety of games. He's probably a better gatekeeper of these games than I am, and including this one, which is a really rare.
Wow.
Yep. So this one here is the ultimate conflict was. I'm not sure if you remember, but we had introduced in the Harbingers game with the Soul Rangers. I've got to say, I think my favourite game is probably the Harbingers, simply because it is the board itself. I think is next level.
It was the first one I played. So
Right.
that's
Oh,
when I
okay.
got into it.
You went backwards. Beautiful. So, this is the Pepsi challenge that we were talking about before. So it was just again one of these things, and that's the music video we did to the song that we released. It was really stupid.
Oh, he's like, yeah, it's one of these things, you know, like partnerships with like one of the biggest companies in the universe. Like,
Yeah,
no
it
big,
was,
we made commercials for Pepsi.
It was fun, but Baron dancing was, the best.
Nothing else looked like your commercials on TV at all. I just think I remember just being grabbed by the face anytime these came on when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Nothing looked like that, and it made you want to play the game. I couldn't imagine seeing it as a trailer in a theater. That would have been.
Yeah, it was phenomenal because again, and you had people answering in the cinemas. So as a creator, to walk into a cinema and see it is really exciting. You know, it was like you just knew things. Your life was okay.
I come from more of a horror world than a gaming world, and I feel like mainstream interest in horror kind of waxes and wanes, and like the 80s were a big moment with VHS, and it is again now. Like horror people all know this game and love it. And, you know, the fandom that has continued to spiral in the 30 ensuing years have called for more interest in the lore. Who is the gatekeeper? What does he want? What is a harbinger? And you've provided that in the form of graphic novels. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, actually, let me see.
You're going to call up those pages?
I can. Yeah, I'll do that now.
Yeah.
So we decided as part of work out how to do this now. There we go. Sorry, everybody.
Don't look at his files.
If you can see anything in there, great. Try not to steal it, just because I've said I don't mind people borrowing stuff. There we go. Look at this, even got Portland. So we did so we got we've released a graphic novel that came with that basically came with the other one, and that was the backstory of the gatekeeper, where he came from, and it also introduced us to Cooper, who's one of the characters, as well as Elizabeth, the vampire. But now we've decided that we're going to do a series of graphic novels to go with it. So the game itself, it's like everything, you want to try to keep things alive, and particularly there seems to be certainly a resurgence in nostalgia, not that that ever really goes away, but with the resurgence in that and with the resurgence in horror, we're just starting to develop new things to go with it. So we do have interest movie-wise. We've been talking about it for a long time, but there is actually genuine interest now, and genuine interest from another games company, but we'd need to tie them together. But we're also doing a series of graphic novels. So this next one is going to be based on The Witch. So that's Anna Chantrain. So she has, we're doing that. I've got just a couple of pages to show on them as well. And again,
Just a peek.
I think the beauty of these things is that it allows, so that's, again, just some of the artwork that we've got happening for it. And again, it's just a different idea in terms of telling people the backstory, because the beauty again of Atmosfear is that it always had a number of different characters. So not only did you have the gatekeeper, but you had all particular characters that could lead themselves to the various stories. So from a series, from all of that sort of stuff, and again to your point just about the look of it, it's always had a very specific sort of style, which has been important to us. So this is the next thing that we're sort of working on now is, obviously we'll be looking towards another game. And certainly when you think about the advent of, not sure if you guys have heard of it, AI, it gives people the opportunity to really think what can happen with you know, something like the gatekeeper or these characters where they can come onto that offer you both a screen and a board game. And the reason we did, and I think it's probably important too, is that I've never really been a video game player. I've played a few, but it's not really my shtick. But the thing that works with a board game is that a board game is tactile, and a board game actually gets people together. So that's one of the reasons why I found, even to this day, that people are still interested in board games. They wane and it comes back, but I think there's always been an interest in it because it is something where a group of people can physically get together, and in a game like Atmosfear, it's fun, and also because it's on a set time limit, it means that you know you're not going to be sent, at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to be arguing with a friend about a hotel or, whether you've got the answer right. You know it's all going to be over pretty quickly. Sometimes it can be over even faster if you're better, and you can beat the gatekeeper.
Gotta be quick to beat the gatekeeper. I don't know about you guys, but this game makes me, I flip out. I become one of the monsters, and I'm yelling at people if they're not paying attention, because you've gotta be on it.
You do, and how much time?
But it's still fun, and the older you get, trying to roll your age in the time limit, it'll make you crazy. It's maddening. But we are out of time, and we do have several of these. Philip is so generous, had these shipped all the way from Australia. Some of the 30th anniversary. What's funny? Is it what I said or what you? Aha! So yes, if you're interested in picking up a copy, you can check out. You can get more information on the QR code. That'll also take you to the graphic novel stuff, so you can stay posted on that. But we do have some to give away. We're going to give away the deluxe edition of the game, as well as the back issue of Rue Morgue with my article on Philip and on Nightmare. And we have some that he opened just the corner of so he could sign, and then we've got some that are minty for you nerds that are caring about that. So what we've decided to do is trivia. We want the biggest super fans of this game, and some of the answers came up in the panel, so if you were paying attention, you should do fine. Philip is going to ask the question, and the first person to stand up with a "Yes, my gatekeeper" will have an opportunity to answer, and they can let us know if they want a minty game or a signed game. How's that sound? Are you guys
May I
ready?
have your attention?
What the?
There has been a fire alarm condition reported in this area. Management is investigating. Please move calmly to the nearest exit. Atención,
That was
por
good
favor.
timing.
Se ha reportado un incidente de alarma de incendios en esta área.
Lightning round. Here we go. Go.
You want to do a lightning round?
Yeah.
Por favor, proceda calmadamente a la salida más cercana.
Yeah. Ask.
No, I think we're going to be booted. At least we will.
May I have your attention?
Thank you for coming, everyone. What the hell? What the actual hell? Philip will be around for a little while. He's catching a flight. I'll be around.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and here are a few more videos for you to check out.